Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. So let me introduce myself. My name is Nadifa and I'm from Linguistics class A. And at this time I would like to present about language and identity, our material, and let's just go to the point. Here the short explanation of language and identity before we go on to the next material. In this chapter, we will look at the construction of personal identities through the use of names and systems of address, and at the construction of group identity through types of representation and adherence to linguistic norms. So we will see how linguistics variation plays a part in the expression of solidarity with or distance from group norms, and how language is connected with cultural identity in this way. We have now that linguistic identity from the point of view of the individual and the group, as well as the institutional and cultural practices of a community of speakers. And as always, however useful these categories is for the purpose of discussion, in practice they overlap and the boundaries between them are probably less clearly defined than is perhaps implied here. The relationship between language and identity will always involve a complex mix of individual, social, and political factors which work to construct people as belonging to a social group or to exclude them from it. So let's move to the next material. The identity, whether it is on an individual, social, or institutional level, is something which we are constantly building and negotiating all our life through our interaction with others. Identity is also multifaceted. People switch into different roles at different times in different situations too, and each of those contexts may require a shift into different, something conflicting identifies for the people involved. Next, so we should know that how language indicates some information. So it is because some factors. For the first, it is because of individual level, where you grow up, where you went to school, how wealthy or not your family were. Often the most immediately obvious difference in the way that people speak is in their accent, the phonological level of language, and also grammatical variations. The importance of accent as a label of identity is evident in so far as this is the aspect of their language they speakers meet frequently change, either to disguise their membership of or distance themselves from a particular social or regional group, or to move closer to another group they want to belong to. And then linguistic identity is not just a matter of using one dialect or code rather than another, or one accent rather than another, but it is also a matter of how we use language with others, and the word how we communicate and interact with other people through talk. And then how language and the construction of personal identities. So in this section we will discuss about how personal identity is socially constructed through the use of names, naming practices, and rituals. Then also system of address, or the way we refer to someone when we are talking to them directly, and how speakers use language to classify and identify each other by the system. So the first we will discuss about name and naming practices. Obvious linguistic means of establishing people identity is through the giving and using names. We are distinguished from other members of a group by our name, which sets us apart as an individual, as different from others, even though we might share other attributes such as belonging to the same family or the same school class. For example, in Britain and United States, Western cultures distinguish between given first name and family last name. Family as the last name. The given name being chosen, the family name being traditionally the father's family name. Such as in Indonesia, I take the example from my friend. Her name is Cindy Setia Ayu Suhartono. So the name Suhartono is the name of her father. So it is the example from name and naming practices. The next, the naming practices and rituals of social group are often similarly important ceremonies. The giving of a name can also be a part of the acceptance of individual into a particular culture or religion, establishing individual identity but also simultaneously a religious identity. The attribution of names is only part of the story. However, once we have our name, how people use it becomes very important. The way names are used in interactions are central to the process of constructing individual identities within a group. The second one is system of address. Not only the name you have, but the way people use it in different contexts, which help to establish your identity within the context. The way that other speakers revert to you can depend on the degree of formality or intimacy and of relative status of all the participants involved in the interaction. This is the example. Mary by title and last name, Miss A, Mr. B, Dr. C, by some kind of differential form, sir or ma'am. The words we choose to address people by are important ways of showing how we situate ourselves in relation to others. So we know from because other people with sir or ma'am, so it is addressed that she or he is older than us. That's the example from system of address. The next is language and the construction of group identities. Our social identities is not something we can always determine on our own. It is also bound up with how others perceive you. In fact, it could be difficult to conceive of identity as a purely individual matter. Our perceptions of ourselves as an individual can only be in relation to others, and your status within a social group, it can be constructed through language used in various ways. And number 4, linguistic variation and the construction of identity. How people can shift between different styles of speaking, varying the features of their accent and dialect, which contribute the construction of a particular social identity at different moments and in different situations. So there is stylistic variation and language choice. Related to number 4, this is the point: defining common systems of representation and adherence Two, in-group linguistic norms are not the only means by which people display their affiliation to a social group. We also position ourselves in relation to others by the way that we talk in different kinds of interaction, because people do not talk in exactly the same way all the time. People may wish to be identified with different groups at different times, and their linguistic patterns may produce a shift, whether between different varieties of a language or from one language to another. The questions of group affiliation and identity can determine the choices a speaker makes about how to speak, and for bilinguals or multilinguals, which language to use. And the second one, from the point of number 4, there is power and linguistic imperialism. A sense of cultural identity is often centered on a particular language, and speakers' perception of the connection between the language they use and that identity is well documented. Loss of a language can also be associated with a loss of cultural identity. Language can be lost for a variety of reasons. For example, speakers may choose to shift from one language to another as social conditions change, or one language may be implied and another suppressed by a dominant power. The meaning from speaker may choose to shift from one language to another as social condition change. Like, I take the example, if we go to foreign countries. In Indonesia, we must talk with another people with Indonesian language, but in another countries or foreign countries, we should talk with another people with international language, that is English language. So we must know the situation when and where we should talk with someone using English language and not. So that's the point from power and linguistic imperialism. I think that's all. Thank you for your attention, and if I have any mistake, I beg your forgiveness. If you have any question, feel free to ask. Thank you, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.